Today my topic is DPSP, that is Directive Principles of State Policy. What is the meaning of Directive Principles of State Policy? It is popularly known as DPSP. So the DPSP has been taken from the Irish Constitution and enumerated in the Part 4 of the Indian Constitution. The concept behind DPSP is to create a welfare state. In other words, the motive behind the inclusion of DPSP is not um, establishing political democracy, rather, it's about establishing social and democratic democracy in the state. There are some basic principles or institutions or guidelines for the government while formulating law or policies for the government and in executing them. According to the Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, these principles are noble features of the Constitution. DPSP acts as a guideline for a state and should be taken into consideration while coming up with something new, new policy or some new law. But no one can compel the state to consider and follow that with all that which is mentioned in DPSP, as DPSP is not justiciable at all. As I mentioned before, that DPSP is in the Part 4 of the Indian Constitution. Then comes the Directive Principle of State Policy and its significance. The DPSP are not justiciable, as I said, but these are backed by Vax Populi, that means voice of the people, which is the real sanction behind every law in reality. DPSP gives the philosophical foundation of a welfare system to these principles make it a responsibility of the state to secure it through welfare legislation. Also, DPSP is significant as it gives the philosophical foundation of a welfare system, as I said, but their nature is of more moral ideas. They constitute a moral code of the state, but it does not reduce their value. As moral principles are very important, and absence of it may hamper the growth of a society. Also, DPSP acts as a guide for the government, which helps them in making policies and laws for the purpose of serving justice and welfare of the state. Directive principles can be called as a positive directions for the state, which helps in the securing of social and economical dimensions of democracy. DPSP are supplementary to fundamental rights, which offer political rights and other freedoms. They both uh, are nothing without each other, as one provides social and economic democracy and other provides the political rights. Then comes the implementation of the DPSPs. There are some acts and policies from 1950 onwards which have been implemented to give effect to the directive principle. They are the first was the Minimum Wage Act, which was in 1948. Then Child Labor Protection and Regulation Act in 1986. Then the Maternity Benefit Act 1961. Um, the the act by the government Jawahar Rozgar Yojana, also several land reform acts and many more. Now comes the DPSPs and the fundamental rights. Fundamental rights are described as the basic rights guaranteed to every citizen of the country under the Constitution. They are present in Part 3 of the Constitution of India, and they ensure some rights to all citizens so that they can, live their lives prospectively. These they help in checking the activities of the government so that it cannot curtail any of the basic rights granted by the constitution um, in the form of fundamental rights. The Indian Constitution recognizes seven fundamental rights. They are the right to for equality, right to freedom, right to freedom of religion, right against exploitation, cultural and uh, educational rights, then right to constitutional remedies, and right to privacy, which was added recently. The principles are mentioned in the Article 36 to 51 in the Part 4 of Indian Constitution. However, there has been a conflict between DPSPs and fundamental right as they are supplementary to each other and are essential to meet the social and economic dimensions of a democratic government. The conflict between them arises often as sometimes it has been seen by various legislation that DPSPs have wider scope than fundamental rights. The fundamental rights are the rights which are enforceable by the court, and any law that is, contravention to the provisions mentioned in Part 3 are otherwise. So, I may conclude by saying that the significance of DPSP cannot be looked upon just because it is not enforceable in any court of law. These principles are added to facilitate the governance and smooth functioning of the country. It was added to meet the main objectives and the ultimate goal of country, that is the work for the welfare of the citizen.